I graduated from the University of Denver in 1970. And I don't know how many of you have spent any time in Denver, particularly in the 70s and 80s, but if you have, you knew that we had a real air pollution problem back then. And whenever we had a temperature inversion in Denver, the color of the air would be the color of these chair seats. And I lived in the mountains in the Front Range, and I would commute down into work, which was with the Community Renewal Program with the City of Denver after I graduated. And I knew on those days when we had real strong inversions that if I drove down in there, I was going to get sick. So I turn around, go back home, and call in sick, because there was no point in going down there and getting sick. Anyway, I decided that I needed to go back to school and learn more about pollution and what its root causes were. The more I studied, the more I realized that it was really the wasteful use of fossil fuel energy that was the primary cause of the pollution problems. Back in those days, there was also a nuclear trigger factory northwest of Denver, and it was called Rocky Flats. They use plutonium to make these nuclear triggers, and the problem was it was in a prevailing northwesterly wind pattern region, and if they lost any of the plutonium, it would go over populated areas. Well, knowing what I knew about proliferation from a book I read by Tamplin and Goffman called Poison Power, I came to the conclusion that nuclear fission was not a good option and that renewables were really the only way to go. So I decided to work on a project, the conference that Jim mentioned, with Environmental Action of Colorado. And we put together this meeting in May of '74. It was really a landmark meeting in that we not only had the charter meeting for the Solar Energy Industries Association, but we also had, that came out of that conference, the Phase Zero studies for the National Science Foundation, as well as the effort to launch the Solar Energy Research Institute in Golden, Colorado, which was not selected to be in Golden at that time, but to at least fund the effort to develop a Solar Energy Research Institute, which is now known as the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. There were countless other efforts that came out of that meeting as well. And in my opinion, it was really a keystone event for launching the whole modern day solar and renewable energy efforts that are happening globally. We had representatives from all over the world, and it was a tremendous success. Okay, so what did I do once I finished in Colorado? I first went to work with a group called American Heliothermal, which was one of the first solar thermal companies publicly traded in the United States. And it, again, developed a solar water heating system that was based on Israeli-made collectors. And from that engineering experience, I went on to team with an old high school buddy back here in Central Virginia, just outside of Charlottesville in Standardsville, Virginia. And we formed a company called North American Solar Development Corporation. And we tried to start selling Israeli-made flat plate collectors to the natives in central Colorado, and learned that, like you said, boy, you see that pile of wood under the shed over there? That's my stored solar energy right there. And of course, this was after it had been raining for 8 weeks straight every day. So I realized pretty early on in my career that selling renewable energy, or particularly solar water heating and solar space heating to Central Virginian native people wasn't going to be easy. So but you know, I was pretty determined. I was also pretty depressed with the rain, but it still, one of the other things that came out of that conference was a fellow by the name of John Schneble. He came up with a product. He came up to me after the conference and said, you know what we really need is a movable window insulation product. And I says, yeah, that's a great idea. Why don't you develop it? And he says, I will. And he did. And the product was called Window Quilt. Well, about that time in my career, John looked me back up and he said, Albert, I've got this thing developed now. I'd like you to help me market it. So I said, well, what's the R value? And he said, it's about 3.5, and it's about a 1/4 inch thick. And I said, you've got to be kidding. Well, anyway, my partner had a pretty big house. It had a lot of skylights and a lot of southwest facing glass. And in Central Virginia, that's the kiss of death in the summer when you've got 95% relative humidity and 90+ degree temperatures. So we said we'd try it. We put it on the windows and the skylights, and by God, didn't it work. So I went ahead and started selling window quilts. And then from there, I realized we could hook up heat pumps to unglazed solar collectors and do heating and cooling with swimming pool type collectors. And the story goes on and on. In the end, the real keys to my success have been basically leading by example. And once I had a vision of how to improve efficiency or improve conservation or even waste heat recovery or passive or active solar, I made the effort to try to commercialize it. And I found people to team with and to network with, and many of you are already in, that know me are still doing this today. There's a number of familiar faces in the audience, and almost too many for me to have you all stand up and take bows. But in any case, we would just go for it. You know, if you have a goal and you see a vision, just mentor other people, be mentored. Some of the best mentors I had were back in Colorado. Two that I'll never forget was Richard L. Crowther, FAIA, who's a phenomenal architect in the Denver area who helped tremendously with the conference, as well as Dr. Jerry Plunkett. Those are two of my key mentors. Some of the other mentors that I've had through my career were let me see here. The Bucky Fuller, I think some of you have heard of him. The other ones that come to mind are Rocky Mountain Institute, Amory Lang, thank you, Amory Lovins, and Bill McDonough. You can learn from others by following their example and their lead, and these are just a few of the people who influenced my career. And then in turn, I try to always be open and generous with my time to team with others to try to move their efforts forward. More recently, I've been working with RER Energy. Before that, Aurora Energy and before that, Thermomax Energy, which is Faribault, Missouri. There are just opportunities that present themselves to cooperate with other individuals that are of like mind, and I strongly urge that you take advantage of those opportunities as they come up and come along, because every one of them counts, and every one of them has a multiplier effect. Every project that you can work on that becomes a successful project is an example to others that can lead to further advancement in efficiency, conservation, and the promotion of renewable technologies. I think none of it really would have been possible, though, without the tremendous support of my spouse, Joan Simons, who has stood by me through a whole lot more thin than thick. But I am also grateful to all of the companies that I've been able to work with and all the government agencies that I've been able to work with through the years in bringing projects to fruition that were really pioneering. Many cases I was asked to do stuff that had never really been done before. And that's always been exciting to me because it had never been done before. so I was always interested in sort of going where no one's gone previously. And, you know, it's been a wonderful career, and it's wonderful that you all have been gracious enough to honor me with this award. And I look forward to continuing in this vein as I move into the future. One area I just have to finish with is that I'm working currently on a project in central Nevada for helping a farmer who grows alfalfa on 2 sections of land with 8 pivot irrigation systems, each requiring 1,000 gallons a minute flow rate. He doesn't have any electricity at this site. It's all done with diesel shaft power driving the pumps, powering these irrigation systems. So the goal is to make these pivots go around during the day because he's in one of the sunniest spots in the country, and then go back to diesel at night. And I think this is a tremendously important project because we're going, as we go further into the future with climate change, and I really don't see that going backwards anytime real soon, but I know Mike Tidwell is working as hard as he can, along with millions of others, to try and make it go backwards. But then there's others that you scratch the back of your head and wonder what they're thinking about. But anyway, the pivot irrigation, I think, systems in developing countries where there's no central grid power is a very important technology to work on. Okay, with that, I'll get off the stage and let it go.